The rescue. 20 years ago, Officer Tom Riley's life changed in a way he could never have predicted. It was a cold November afternoon in 2003, and the seasoned Atlanta police officer was dispatched to a rundown neighborhood on the city's outskirts. The area was notorious for crime and poverty, with abandoned homes and derelict structures marking its landscape. But the call that day was different. It wasn't about drugs or violence. This was a welfare check for suspected child abandonment. Tom's experience on the force had exposed him to all kinds of human suffering, but nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to encounter. When he pulled up to the crumbling, gray house, he felt a knot tighten in his stomach. The place looked like it had been forgotten by time. Windows shattered, paint peeling, and weeds growing wild around the yard. There was no sign of life, only a deafening silence that felt almost accusatory. He knocked on the door, his voice steady but gentle. "Atlanta PD. Is anyone here?" No answer. With a deep breath, he turned the doorknob, surprised to find it unlocked. The door creaked open, revealing a dark and cluttered living room that smelled of mildew and neglect. But amidst the shadows, he saw movement, a cluster of small figures huddled together, eyes wide with fear. 5 little girls sat on the floor, each of them staring at him with expressions that ranged from confusion to terror. The eldest, no more than 9, held a baby tightly in her arms, her face streaked with dirt and tears. The other 3 girls clung to each other, visibly shaking. Tom's heart broke as he realized the reality of their situation. These girls were alone, abandoned, and vulnerable in a way he had never witnessed before. Tom crouched down, his voice soft and reassuring. "Hey there. It's okay. I'm here to help." The oldest girl, whose name he later learned was Sarah, looked at him with a mix of wariness and hope. Are you taking us away?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Tom swallowed hard, struggling to keep his composure. "I'm here to make sure you're safe," he replied, though his heart ached at the thought of them being left to the mercy of a flawed system. He knew what awaited children like them. A series of foster homes, a life spent moving from one temporary family to the next, often with no real stability or love. As the hours passed, Tom followed protocol. He called social services, had the girls checked by medical personnel, and filled out the necessary paperwork. But the more he watched them, the harder it became to imagine sending them away. By the time the social worker arrived, he felt an inexplicable connection to the girls, an unspoken bond that tugged at his heart. The social worker, a tired woman with years of experience, looked at Tom as she closed her clipboard. She paused, her gaze softening as she saw the emotion in his eyes. "Would you consider fostering them, Officer Riley?" she asked. The question took him by surprise, and he hesitated, unable to answer. That night, he returned to his quiet, empty home, but sleep evaded him. The faces of those 5 little girls haunted him, their fearful expressions, and the faint glimmer of hope that shone at his arrival. He tossed and turned, battling with himself. By morning, he had made up his mind. With little more than his gut instinct and a newfound sense of purpose, Tom walked into the social services office, his decision solidified. He would foster them, all 5 of them. Learning to be a father. The first night Tom brought the girls home was nothing short of chaotic. His once quiet bachelor's life was upended in an instant, his house now bursting with giggles, cries, and endless questions. His small home, which once felt spacious, was suddenly overflowing with 5 little lives who needed care, comfort, and a stability they'd never known. Tom had no parenting experience and little knowledge of how to handle children, let alone 5 girls who had already been through so much. But he knew he had made a commitment, and there was no turning back. Tom spent the first night stumbling through the basics. He cooked a simple dinner, realizing too late that he had made too little. He tried to set up sleeping arrangements, eventually placing blankets and pillows in the living room for an impromptu sleepover when it became clear that the girls didn't want to be separated. The youngest, Emma, whimpered whenever Tom left her sight. clinging to him with her tiny fingers wrapped around his shirt as if he were the only safe thing in the world. Sarah, the eldest, stayed alert and watchful, almost as if she were still in survival mode, ready to protect her sisters at any moment. Tom noticed how she often looked to him for reassurance, her eyes filled with a maturity that seemed unnatural for a child her age. Sarah, he realized, had probably been more of a parent to her sisters than he could fathom. She wasn't ready to trust that someone else could take on that role. That night, as the girls finally fell asleep, Tom sat alone in his bedroom, exhaustion and doubt settling over him like a heavy blanket. The weight of what he had taken on was overwhelming. He didn't know the first thing about braiding hair, shopping for little girls' clothes, or soothing their nightmares. He barely had enough money saved up to support himself, let alone 5 children. But every time he thought about the day he found them in that dark, cold house, he knew he couldn't walk away. Over the next few weeks, Tom's life transformed completely. Gone were his quiet mornings and solitary evenings. He had to adapt to a new routine, one that involved school pickups, meal preparations, and late-night comfort sessions for girls who often woke up crying from nightmares. Tom learned to braid hair by watching videos online, his fingers fumbling at first, but eventually gaining confidence. He memorized their preferences. Jessica liked her eggs scrambled, while the twins, Megan and Melissa, always wanted theirs sunny side up. Little by little, he became attuned to each girl's unique personality and needs. Sarah was strong and responsible, always looking after her sisters and sometimes even trying to help Tom with household chores. She was wise beyond her years, and Tom could see that she bore the weight of being the eldest in ways that sometimes made her seem more like a co-parent than a child. Jessica, the second oldest, was sensitive and creative. She loved to draw, often disappearing into her little world with crayons and paper. The twins, Megan and Melissa, were inseparable. They had their own language of whispers and giggles, always huddled together, sharing secrets only they understood. And then there was Emma, the youngest, whose laughter could light up the room. She was shy, but once she warmed up, her curiosity and mischievous smile brought endless joy to Tom. Despite the small victories, there were still many struggles. Tom's inexperience led to countless mishaps. One morning, he accidentally dressed Emma in mismatched clothes for school, leading to a round of teasing that left her in tears. Another day, he forgot to pack lunch for the twins, only realizing his mistake when they returned home ravenous and cranky. There were nights when all 5 girls would cry at once, their collective sobs filling the house, and Tom, unsure of what to do, would hold them as best as he could, whispering words of comfort even though he didn't feel confident himself. Money was tight too. Tom's salary barely covered the basics, and he found himself stretching every dollar, learning to budget in ways he had never needed to before. There were times he went without lunch at work just so he could buy the girls' school supplies or a special treat on the weekends. The weight of responsibility was crushing, but every time he looked at their faces, he knew it was worth it. One evening, after the girls were tucked into bed, Tom sat in the living room, going through bills and trying to figure out how he would cover the next month's expenses. Sarah appeared in the doorway, clutching her favorite worn-out teddy bear. She looked at him, her young face serious, and asked, "Are we too much trouble for you?" The question pierced Tom's heart. He set the bills aside and motioned for her to sit beside him. "Sarah," he said gently, placing a hand on her shoulder, "you and your sisters are the best thing that ever happened to me. It's hard sometimes, but it's not because of you. It's because I'm still learning. But I wouldn't trade this for anything. Not for all the quiet nights in the world." Sarah's eyes shimmered with tears, and she hugged him tightly, her small arms wrapping around his neck with an intensity that nearly took his breath away. In that moment, Tom realized that while he might not have all the answers, he had the one thing that mattered most: love. And that, he hoped, would be enough. As the months passed, Tom's little family continued to grow closer. The girls adjusted to their new lives, and Tom became not only a provider but a source of strength and warmth they could rely on. He wasn't just Officer Tom Riley anymore. He was Dad. He was the one who bandaged scraped knees, read bedtime stories, and celebrated report card achievements with homemade cake. One Saturday, he took the girls to the park. It was a warm spring day, the sun shining down as they played on the swings and slides, their laughter filling the air. As Tom watched them, he felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude and pride. These girls, who had once been strangers, were now his family. He may not have planned for this, but he knew, deep in his heart, that this was the life he was meant to live. But beneath the joy, Tom knew that raising 5 girls alone would be a long journey, filled with challenges he couldn't yet foresee. He was only at the beginning, and he still had so much to learn. However, as he watched them play, he felt a fierce determination to give them a life full of love, security, and opportunities, no matter what obstacles came his way. What Tom didn't know was that these early days, filled with laughter, tears, and unbreakable bonds, would lay the foundation for a future that would astonish even him. A future where the impact of his selfless choice would ripple far beyond what he could ever imagine. Building a new life. As the years passed, Tom settled into his role as a father, learning and growing alongside his 5 daughters. Every day brought new lessons and challenges, but there was a rhythm to their lives now, a sense of stability and security that the girls had never known before. With each passing day, they blossomed, and Tom felt himself changing as well. He was no longer just Officer Riley, or the single guy his colleagues saw as tough and stoic. Now he was Dad, a title that softened him and made him feel whole in ways he had never imagined. The girls were thriving in their new lives, and each of them brought a unique light to the family. Tom made it a point to support each one's individuality and encourage them to follow their passions. He became the kind of dad who attended every school play, science fair, and soccer game, always cheering them on with an enthusiasm that belied his once reserved nature. The quiet, ordered life he once had was gone, replaced by a whirlwind of laughter, tears, sibling rivalries, and love, and he cherished every moment. Sarah, the oldest, had transformed over the years. Initially burdened by the weight of responsibility for her sisters, she slowly learned to let go and enjoy her childhood. Tom saw her mature into a thoughtful and responsible young woman, yet he made sure she knew that it was okay to rely on him. She no longer had to carry the world on her shoulders. In high school, she joined the debate team, where her resilience and quick wit shone. Watching her confidently take on arguments in front of an audience, Tom often marveled at how far she had come. She was no longer the wary little girl he had found clinging to her sisters in a dark house. She was a bright, determined young woman with dreams of becoming a lawyer. Jessica, the second-born, was the family's artist. Tom nurtured her creativity, buying her sketchbooks, pencils, and paints, even when money was tight. He saw how art became her escape, her way of processing emotions too complex for words. Her drawings often adorned the walls of their home, turning it into a personal gallery that told the story of their family. Over time, Jessica's work grew in complexity, capturing moments from their lives. Tom's weathered hands holding a young Emma's tiny fingers, Sarah's pensive gaze, the twins sharing a secret. Each piece was a testament to their journey, and Tom was endlessly proud of her talent. The twins, Megan and Melissa, remained inseparable. They were the entertainers of the family, always finding ways to make their sisters laugh. Tom quickly discovered that they both loved music, so he found a second-hand keyboard and saved up to get them guitar lessons. They practiced endlessly, often putting on concerts in the living room. Tom clapped and cheered at every performance, no matter how out of tune or chaotic the songs were. He knew these moments mattered. They were building memories, solidifying their bonds as sisters and as a family. Megan and Melissa dreamed of forming a band one day, and Tom supported their ambitions wholeheartedly, even if it meant enduring hours of off-key practice sessions. And then there was Emma, the youngest. She had grown from a quiet, shy child into a vibrant and curious little girl. Tom often found her sneaking into his office to ask questions about his job as a police officer, her eyes wide with fascination. She would sit at his desk, pretending to be Detective Emma, solving imaginary cases and using the flashlight he'd given her as a badge. Tom saw in her a spark of courage and determination that reminded him of himself. He encouraged her to explore her interests, knowing that she had the potential to become whatever she wanted. As the girls grew older, Tom made sure they understood the importance of hard work and resilience. He shared stories from his own life about the challenges he faced growing up and the sacrifices he'd made to become a police officer. But he was careful not to romanticize hardship. He wanted them to know that while life would inevitably have its trials, they didn't have to face them alone. They had each other, and they had him. One winter, when Sarah was in high school, she brought up the idea of volunteering at a local shelter. "Dad," she said one evening as they sat together after dinner, "I think we should give back. We have so much now, and there are people out there who could use our help. We could make it a family thing." Tom's heart swelled with pride. He knew that Sarah's suggestion came from her understanding of where they had come from, a reminder of the hardships they had endured and the kindness that others had shown them. They started spending Saturdays volunteering at the shelter, serving food, organizing donations, and spending time with the residents. The experience brought them even closer as a family, reminding them to be grateful for what they had. But despite the joy and growth within their family, Tom still faced struggles, especially with the outside world. Some people questioned his decision to adopt 5 black girls, and there were moments when he encountered prejudice. Even colleagues who respected him as an officer sometimes showed their bias in subtle, hurtful ways. Tom knew that the world wouldn't always be fair to his daughters, but he was determined to equip them with the strength and resilience to face it. One evening, after a particularly difficult day at work, Tom sat down with the girls to have a serious conversation. "You're all going to face challenges because of who you are and where you come from," he began, his voice steady but soft. "There will be people who judge you without knowing your story. But I want you to remember that you're strong and you're never alone. No matter what happens, this family will stand together." The girls listened intently, their eyes reflecting a mix of understanding and sadness. Tom knew that he couldn't shield them from the world's ugliness, but he could give them a foundation of love and unity that would carry them through. Years passed, and Tom watched his daughters flourish. Sarah graduated at the top of her high school class, earning a scholarship to college where she pursued her dream of studying law. Jessica's artwork gained recognition, and she was accepted into an art program that encouraged her creativity. The twins, Megan and Melissa, continued to pursue music, forming a small band that played at local events, and Emma, still fascinated by her father's work, started showing interest in criminal justice. Through it all, Tom remained their anchor, their protector, and their guide. He had gone from a man who barely knew how to comfort a crying child to a father who had raised 5 extraordinary young women. He wasn't just their dad. He was their hero, a man who had given them love, security, and the courage to face the world. One summer evening, as they sat around a bonfire in the backyard, Sarah looked at her father, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Dad," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I don't know where we'd be without you. You saved us." Tom smiled, pulling her into a hug as the other girls joined in. "No," he said softly, his voice choked with pride. "You girls saved me." In that moment, surrounded by the warmth of the fire and the love of his daughters, Tom knew that he had been given a gift far greater than anything he could have imagined. This family, built through resilience and bound by love, was his greatest accomplishment, and he couldn't wait to see what the future held for each of them. They had repaid him in ways he couldn't have foreseen, simply by becoming the remarkable young women they were destined to be. Facing the world together. The years had been kind to Tom Riley's family, but they were also full of challenges and harsh realities. As each of his daughters grew older, they began to encounter the world on their own terms, and the world was not always kind. Tom knew this day would come, and he prepared himself for it, but seeing his daughters face discrimination and bias brought a renewed weight to his heart. It was one thing to face adversity himself as a police officer, but it was entirely different when it affected his beloved daughters. The first real encounter happened with Sarah when she was in her sophomore year of college. She called him late one night, her voice shaking, barely holding back tears. She explained that during a group project, a classmate had made a racist comment, questioning her intelligence and insinuating she was only in college because of diversity quotas. Sarah, who was fiercely independent and often unshakable, had confronted him, but the pain of his words lingered. Tom listened quietly, letting her express her anger and pain. "Dad," she said, her voice breaking, "I worked so hard to get here. I didn't think people still saw me like this, as if I'm just here because someone let me in out of pity." He took a deep breath, remembering all the times he'd faced similar situations, the countless moments he'd been judged or underestimated. "Sarah," he said gently, "I'm so proud of you. You didn't get where you are because of anything other than your own hard work. And remember, sometimes people will try to tear you down when they see you achieving more than they ever could. You have every right to be there. Don't ever let anyone make you feel otherwise." They spent hours on the phone that night, and by the time they hung up, Sarah's resolve had returned. She was ready to face her classmate the next day, not with anger, but with a quiet confidence that had always been her strength. Jessica's challenge came in a different form. She had been accepted into a prestigious art program, a place she had dreamed of joining since high school. But once she got there, she quickly realized that the art world wasn't as accepting as she had hoped. Her classmates often treated her with indifference, and her instructors seemed to view her work through a lens clouded by prejudice. She overheard one professor refer to her art as urban in a dismissive tone, as if it was somehow less valuable because of her background. One evening, Tom noticed Jessica sitting quietly in her room, her sketchbook unopened on her lap. He sat down next to her and waited for her to speak. Finally, she sighed and looked at him. "Dad, I feel like I don't belong. They look at my art like it's not real art, just because I don't paint the same things they do." Tom placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Art is about expressing who you are, Jess, not about fitting into someone else's mold. Remember that the world may not always see the beauty in things that are different, but that doesn't mean they're not beautiful. You're not here to prove yourself to anyone but yourself." Inspired by her father's words, Jessica channeled her frustration into her art, creating a series of pieces that spoke to her experience as a black woman in a predominantly white field. The work was raw, powerful, and unapologetic. When she presented it to her class, there was a stunned silence, followed by a wave of praise. Even her professor, who had once dismissed her, looked at her with newfound respect. Jessica had proven herself, not by conforming, but by embracing her uniqueness. Meanwhile, the twins, Megan and Melissa, were facing challenges of their own as they pursued their dream of forming a band. They had started performing at local venues, often filling small bars and coffee shops with their music. They loved every moment on stage, but they quickly learned that not everyone appreciated seeing two black girls in a rock band. They dealt with rude comments, dismissive attitudes, and even outright hostility. One night, after a particularly rough performance where the crowd had been cold and unresponsive, they returned home visibly shaken. Tom sat down with them in the kitchen as they recounted the experience, their voices laced with frustration and disappointment. "They don't take us seriously, Dad," Megan said, clenching her fists. "We're just the black girl band to them. They don't care about our music." Tom nodded, understanding their pain. "You know, sometimes the world isn't ready for change, but that doesn't mean you have to change who you are. If they don't want to listen, then play louder. If they don't want to see you, then make them. You're doing something important. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." With renewed determination, Megan and Melissa continued performing, honing their skills, and building a following. They found their own fans, people who appreciated their music for what it was and saw them for who they were. Over time, their confidence grew, and so did their reputation. They became known not just as a band, but as a symbol of resilience and pride. Then there was Emma, the youngest, who faced her own struggles as she approached high school. Emma had always been the curious one, the one who asked questions about Tom's work as a police officer and who dreamed of following in his footsteps. But as she grew older, she began to understand the complexities of his profession and the strained relationship between law enforcement and her community. One day, Emma came home visibly upset after a conversation with her classmates. They had questioned her, making comments about her dad's job and accusing her of siding with the enemy. For the first time, Emma felt torn between her love for her father and the harsh realities of the world she was growing up in. Tom sat down with her, his heart heavy. "Emma," he began, his voice soft, "I know it's hard to reconcile. What I do as a police officer doesn't define who I am as a person or as your father. And what others think of you doesn't define who you are. Remember, you have the power to make a difference just by being true to yourself." Emma looked at him with wide, understanding eyes, and slowly, a look of resolve settled on her face. She knew that her father's job didn't make him any less her hero. She decided then and there that she would pursue criminal justice, not because she wanted to follow in his footsteps, but because she wanted to make a difference in her own way. Through these trials, Tom's daughters continued to grow, each one finding strength and purpose in the face of adversity. And through it all, Tom stood by them, offering guidance, wisdom, and unconditional love. He realized that their struggles, though painful, were shaping them into remarkable young women who would change the world in ways he could never have imagined. And as he watched them navigate life's challenges, Tom felt a deep sense of pride. He knew that he had given them more than just a home. He had given them the tools to face a world that would not always be kind. And in doing so, they had given him something priceless in return, a legacy of resilience, love, and strength. The Riley family was no longer defined by their beginnings, but by the journey they had taken together. They had faced the world and all its hardships, and they had emerged stronger, bound by a love that nothing could break. The bonds forged through fire. As the years passed, Tom Riley's daughters continued to pursue their dreams and make their mark on the world. Each of them faced unique challenges, but they never wavered in their resolve, and they always knew that they had a solid foundation in their father. Tom had given them the gift of stability, and now, as adults, they were determined to show him just how much he meant to them. What he didn't realize, however, was that the daughters he had saved so many years ago were quietly planning to give back in ways that would change his life forever. The first hint of their intentions came from Sarah. By now, Sarah had become an attorney, specializing in civil rights cases. She had carved out a name for herself as a fierce advocate for marginalized communities, defending those who couldn't defend themselves. Her work was more than just a career. It was a calling, inspired by her father's legacy of service and sacrifice. She had a relentless drive to change the world, one case at a time, and she was damn good at it. One evening, Sarah invited Tom over to her modest yet cozy apartment, where they shared dinner and talked about everything from recent legal victories to her childhood memories of him reading bedtime stories after a long shift. Over dessert, Sarah grew quiet, studying her father's worn, familiar face. She realized just how much of himself he had given to his daughters, sacrificing personal ambition and wealth to ensure they had the life he never did. "Dad," she said, breaking the silence, "have you ever thought about what you want to do for yourself? Now that we're all grown up, I mean." Tom chuckled, waving her off. "Oh, honey, seeing you all happy and thriving is more than I could have ever asked for. I'm already the luckiest man in the world." But Sarah wasn't satisfied with that answer. Over the following weeks, she began reaching out to her sisters with an idea that had been forming in her mind. She wanted to do something meaningful, something that would reflect their collective gratitude for everything Tom had done. Each sister, upon hearing her plan, readily agreed, feeling that same deep sense of love and indebtedness. Jessica, who had found her place in the world as an artist, took charge of organizing a surprise event. Her success as an artist had blossomed into a career where her work was showcased in prestigious galleries. She had even founded a community art program that provided free classes for underprivileged youth. She knew that much of her drive came from Tom's unwavering support for her creative passions, even when others doubted her. Jessica's idea was simple, a gathering to honor their father. But as she began planning, the idea grew, gathering more depth and meaning. Soon, she was reaching out to friends, community members, and even Tom's former colleagues from the police force. She wanted to celebrate her father not just as their dad, but as a man who had profoundly impacted countless lives. She found herself creating an art piece for the occasion, a large, vibrant portrait of Tom surrounded by images representing his daughters and the community he had touched. It would be her gift to him, an acknowledgement of his impact and legacy. Megan and Melissa, the twins, took the reins on logistics. Now widely recognized musicians, they had the resources and contacts to arrange a beautiful venue and provide entertainment for the event. They were fiercely proud of what their band had achieved, touring across the country and even internationally. Their music had allowed them to reach people in ways they had never dreamed, and every time they stepped on stage, they remembered the words their father had instilled in them. Play loud enough so that the world can't ignore you. The twins knew that the event had to be more than a simple gathering. It had to be an unforgettable experience, a tribute worthy of the man who had shaped their lives. They organized catering, coordinated schedules, and reached out to local news outlets, who were more than eager to cover the story of a police officer who had taken in 5 young girls and changed their lives forever. Emma, the youngest, was the last piece of the puzzle. As a recent graduate in criminal justice, she had decided to follow in her father's footsteps, but with a twist. She wanted to work not only within the system, but to transform it from the inside out. Emma's role in the event planning was to gather testimonials and stories from people Tom had impacted throughout his life. She reached out to individuals who had been helped by his kindness, former classmates who remembered his mentorship, and colleagues who had seen his dedication firsthand. The stories she collected were incredible. People recalled Tom helping them through some of the darkest moments of their lives, always with humility and grace. Emma compiled these stories into a short film that would be shown at the event, a visual testament to Tom's legacy. As she worked on the project, she felt a deeper connection to her father's life and his sacrifices. She began to see him not only as her dad, but as a hero whose quiet acts of kindness had left a profound mark on those around him. Finally, the day of the event arrived. Tom had been invited under the guise of a family dinner, completely unaware of the elaborate surprise awaiting him. He entered the venue, a beautifully decorated hall filled with familiar faces, and was immediately overcome with emotion. As he walked in, he saw the portrait Jessica had painted, a powerful image that captured not only his likeness, but the love and respect his daughters held for him. One by one, people approached Tom to express their gratitude, sharing stories of how he had changed their lives in ways he could never have known. Former colleagues praised his integrity, old friends spoke of his kindness, and community members thanked him for his support. Tom listened, moved beyond words, humbled by the realization of the lives he had touched just by being himself. The highlight of the night was the short film Emma had prepared. As it played, the audience was silent, watching Tom's life unfold through the eyes of those who admired him. They saw a man who had overcome adversity, who had defied the odds to give 5 abandoned girls a home and a future. By the end of the film, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Finally, his daughters took the stage, each one expressing what he meant to them. Sarah spoke of his unwavering support, Jessica of his encouragement of her art, Megan and Melissa of his belief in their music, and Emma of his inspiration to pursue justice. They had each prepared their words carefully, but as they spoke, Emotion took over, and they shared from their hearts, recounting the sacrifices he had made and the lessons he had taught. "Dad," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion, "you took in 5 girls who had nothing, who were unwanted, and you gave us a life. You gave us hope, a home, and the strength to face the world. We wouldn't be here without you." Tom stood in the crowd, his heart swelling with pride and love. He had never expected this, never thought that his quiet acts of love would one day come back to him in this way. In that moment, he saw his daughters not just as his girls, but as remarkable women who had overcome their own struggles and achieved greatness in their own right. After the speeches, the twins took the stage to perform a song they had written for their father, a powerful anthem of resilience, family, and love. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, filled with notes of sorrow and triumph, and the lyrics spoke to the bond that had held them together through every storm. As the final notes faded, Tom looked around at his daughters, his friends, and his community, overwhelmed by the love that surrounded him. In that moment, he realized that his life had come full circle. The 5 girls he had saved had now saved him, reminding him that his life's purpose had always been about something greater than himself. Tom Riley had given his daughters a home, but they had given him a legacy. And as he embraced each of them, he knew that he had done something that would live on far beyond his own lifetime. A legacy carved in love. The morning after the tribute, Tom woke with a lingering warmth in his heart. He had barely slept, replaying every word his daughters had shared, every face he had seen, every story he had heard from people whose lives he had touched without even realizing it. That night had been more than just an event. It had been a revelation. His daughters' love, their resilience, their gratitude, had filled a void he never knew he carried. As he looked at the sunrise through his bedroom window, he felt a profound peace, knowing that the impact of his love had rippled out further than he ever intended or anticipated. Over the following weeks, Tom's life transformed in ways he had not foreseen. People in the community who had heard about the tribute began stopping him on the streets, thanking him for his service, expressing admiration for the man who had raised 5 incredible women. Tom was humbled by the attention, having always been more comfortable in the background, quietly offering support. But his daughter's tribute had made him a symbol of resilience and unconditional love, and he found himself approached by local organizations, community leaders, and even the press, who wanted to share his story and spread its inspiration. One afternoon, as he was getting coffee at a local diner, a young man approached him nervously. Dressed in a worn hoodie and jeans, he looked at Tom with a mixture of awe and vulnerability. "Excuse me, sir," he said, his voice hesitant. "You're Officer Riley, right? The one who took in 5 girls all by yourself?" Tom nodded, offering the young man a warm smile. "That's me." Just Tom, though. No need to be formal. The young man shifted on his feet, clearly nervous. "I just wanted to say thank you. Not just for what you did for your daughters, but for showing people like me that it's possible to find love, even when it feels like no one wants you." Tom felt his heart swell with empathy. He could see the pain in the young man's eyes, the remnants of rejection and loss. Without hesitation, he gestured for the young man to sit down. They talked for over an hour. The young man, whose name was Devin, shared his story of growing up in foster care, bouncing from home to home, always feeling like an outsider. He'd heard about Tom's story through one of his daughter's social media posts, and it had given him hope. Now he was determined to turn his life around, to go back to school and find stability, even if he had to do it on his own. Tom listened, his heart aching for Devin's struggles. When they parted, he promised to stay in touch, offering Devin his phone number and the assurance that he could call whenever he needed someone to talk to. As Devin walked away, Tom realized that his daughter's tribute had opened a new door in his life, one where he could use his experiences to guide and uplift others, just as he had with his daughters. Meanwhile, Sarah, Jessica, Megan, Melissa, and Emma continued to flourish in their respective paths. But now, they carried with them a renewed sense of purpose. Each sister felt a stronger connection to their father's legacy, and they began discussing ways to honor him on a larger scale. It wasn't long before they came up with an idea that would impact countless others, just as Tom had impacted them. Together, they founded the Riley Foundation for Family and Resilience, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting children in foster care, single parents, and veterans. They envisioned a place where children could find mentorship, where parents who were struggling could access resources, and where veterans could receive the support and respect they deserved. The foundation would be a reflection of everything their father stood for: compassion, resilience, and the unbreakable bonds of family. The foundation's opening was a grand event, attended by friends, community members, and even some of Tom's former colleagues. Tom was deeply moved as he watched his daughters speak about the foundation's mission. Their words were full of conviction, echoing the values he had instilled in them since they were children. When it was his turn to speak, he stood before the crowd, overwhelmed with gratitude. "I never set out to be a hero," Tom began, his voice steady but emotional. "All I ever wanted was to give my girls a safe place to grow, a chance to know they were loved and valued. I never imagined that my actions would inspire anything beyond the walls of our home. But seeing what my daughters have built here today, I am humbled and honored. This foundation isn't just about helping others. It's about giving people a chance to feel seen, heard, and supported. It's about making sure no one feels abandoned or alone, no matter what life throws at them." His words were met with thunderous applause, but the true reward was in his daughters' eyes. He could see the pride, the gratitude, and the love that filled their hearts. And he knew, without a doubt, that his legacy would live on through them, through the foundation, and through every life they touched. The foundation quickly became a beacon of hope for the community. Children in foster care found mentors who could guide them through the ups and downs of growing up. Single parents were given access to support groups and resources that helped them provide for their families. Veterans received counseling, job training, and a place where they were honored and respected for their service. Tom was an active part of the foundation, attending events, offering advice, and even mentoring some of the young people who came through its doors. He saw himself in many of them, lost souls looking for a place to belong. And each time he connected with someone, he felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that he was fulfilling his life's mission. One evening, as he and his daughters gathered at his home for dinner, Tom looked around the table, taking in the laughter and love that filled the room. Sarah was discussing her latest case, Jessica was sharing a story from her latest art exhibit, and the twins were playfully teasing Emma about her new boyfriend. Tom felt a swell of pride, not just in their accomplishments, but in the people they had become: kind, compassionate, and resilient. As the night drew to a close, Emma raised her glass, her eyes sparkling with emotion. "To Dad," she said, her voice filled with warmth. "To the man who gave us a family, who taught us how to be strong, and who showed us that love is the most powerful thing in the world." The others joined in, their glasses clinking in a heartful toast. Tom looked at each of his daughters, his heart overflowing with love and gratitude. He knew that his journey had not been easy, that he had faced challenges he never could have anticipated. But as he sat surrounded by the family he had built, he realized that every sacrifice, every hardship, had been worth it. In that moment, Tom Riley knew that his legacy would live on, not just through his daughters, but through every life they touched, through the foundation, and through the love that bound them all together. He had created something beautiful, something enduring, and as he looked into the faces of his daughters, he knew that his story was only just beginning.